Motorcycles have always represented freedom, rebellion, and the raw thrill of mechanical power unleashed on two wheels. But some machines pushed so far beyond reason that they became genuinely dangerous. Bikes that killed their riders, terrified manufacturers, and earned reputations that still echo decades later. Today, we're counting down the 15 most dangerous motorcycles ever made, from two-stroke triples that earned the nickname Widowmaker to modern superbikes so fast they triggered international agreements to limit speed. These aren't just powerful motorcycles. These are machines that demanded respect, punished mistakes violently, and proved that sometimes engineering ambition exceeded the technology available to make that power safe. From primitive brakes meeting modern power to unstable suspensions that sent bikes into death wobbles, these are the motorcycles that define dangerous. This is the story of two-wheeled machines that proved speed and power without adequate control systems could kill. Number 15. Vincent Black Shadow. The Vincent Black Shadow takes 15th position as the world's first superbike and one of the most dangerous motorcycles ever built, combining 1948 engineering with performance that wouldn't be matched for decades. The 998 cubic inch V-twin produced 55 horsepower, modest output by modern standards, but genuinely extreme for 1948, when most motorcycles produced half that power and were designed for speeds the Black Shadow could exceed effortlessly. The V-twin featured sophisticated engineering for its era, with dual carburetors, high compression, and construction that allowed sustained high-speed operation that would destroy lesser engines. The Black Shadow could reach 125 miles per hour, a speed that seemed impossible in 1948 when roads were primitive, tires were marginal, and safety equipment didn't exist beyond leather jackets and inadequate helmets. The danger came from performance that exceeded every other component's capabilities. The brakes were drums front and rear, adequate for normal speeds but completely overwhelmed when trying to slow from 125 miles per hour, creating stopping distances that seemed impossibly long and required planning stops miles in advance. The frame was sophisticated for 1948, but flexed under hard acceleration and high-speed cornering, creating handling that felt nervous and unpredictable when speeds climbed beyond what the designers anticipated riders would attempt. Ever twisted the throttle on a bike that genuinely terrified you? Know someone who rode a Widowmaker and lived to tell about it? Drop your story in the comments. Subscribe now. We're diving deeper into the motorcycles that changed history, and you don't want to miss what's next. The suspension was basic, with minimal damping and crude adjustments. That meant the Black Shadow bounced and wallowed over bumps that modern suspension would absorb without affecting stability. The tires were narrow, with compounds that provided minimal grip compared to modern rubber, limiting acceleration, braking, and cornering capabilities that engine performance suggested should be possible. Number 14. Kawasaki Ninja ZX-11. The 1990 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-11 represented the peak of the speed wars that defined late 80s and early 90s sport bikes, featuring 1,052 cubic inch inline-4, producing 147 horsepower that created top speeds approaching 175 miles per hour. The ZX-11 was the fastest production motorcycle available when introduced, claiming the title through brute force rather than sophisticated aerodynamics or advanced materials. The inline-4 delivered smooth, relentless power throughout the RPM range, with peak output arriving at high revolutions that required riders to work through the gears extracting maximum performance. The engine featured sophisticated fuel injection and engine management that optimized power delivery while meeting emission standards. But the sheer output created speeds that exceeded what safety systems available in 1990 could manage safely. The danger came from speed, without modern rider aids to prevent loss of control. The ZX-11 had no traction control, no anti-lock brakes, and minimal electronic assistance beyond fuel injection managing engine operation. Riders managed wheel spin manually, modulated brakes carefully to avoid locking wheels, and accepted that 175 miles per hour was achievable but genuinely dangerous, because nothing prevented mistakes from becoming fatal accidents. The front brake discs were large and powerful, but without ABS, threshold braking required precise modulation to achieve maximum stopping power without locking the front wheel and losing all steering control. in situations where maintaining directional stability meant the difference between surviving and crashing. The rear brake was conventional, but nearly useless at high speeds, where any rear wheel lockup would cause the bike to slide sideways violently, requiring riders to essentially ignore the rear brake during aggressive riding and rely entirely on front braking that could lock without warning. The suspension was conventional with limited adjustability and damping that became overwhelmed at extreme speeds, creating handling that felt stable at moderate velocities, but developed oscillations and instability when speeds climbed beyond 150 miles per hour, where aerodynamic forces created unpredictable loads. The steering geometry was conservative with rake and trail, designed for stability rather than quick direction changes, meaning the ZX11 felt planted during highway riding, but required substantial effort to initiate corners, and felt reluctant to change direction quickly when emergency maneuvers became necessary. The fuel capacity exceeded 5 gallons, providing adequate range for highway cruising, but creating weight high in the chassis that affected handling dynamics and made the bike feel top-heavy during slow-speed maneuvering, despite the relatively low center of gravity when the tank was empty. The windscreen provided excellent wind protection at high speeds, but created turbulence at the helmet that buffeted riders violently during sustained triple-digit velocities, creating fatigue that reduced concentration precisely when maximum focus was needed to safely manage the speeds the ZX11 could achieve. The seat was comfortable for moderate distances, but became genuinely painful during extended high-speed runs where the aggressive riding position and constant wind pressure created muscle fatigue that made maintaining proper body position increasingly difficult as rides extended beyond an hour. The instrumentation was comprehensive, with speedometer reading to 180 miles per hour and tachometer providing redline warnings, but the analog gauges were difficult to read precisely at high speeds, where glancing down to check velocity meant taking eyes off the road ahead for crucial fractions of seconds. The exhaust note was subdued at legal speeds, but became a rising shriek as revolutions climbed toward redline, creating sound that was thrilling and addictive, but also advertised to law enforcement exactly how fast the ZX11 was traveling from blocks away. The clutch was cable-operated, requiring substantial lever effort that created hand fatigue during stop-and-go traffic, making the ZX11 genuinely unpleasant for daily commuting, despite its capabilities on open roads, where the performance could be safely explored away from congestion and traffic that made the bike's genuine capabilities irrelevant and dangerous to attempt. The handling was adequate for the era, but primitive by modern standards. The suspension was conventional with limited adjustability and damping that became overwhelmed at extreme speeds. The aerodynamics created lift at high speeds rather than downforce, making the front end light and creating instability that required constant steering corrections. The ZX11 was dangerous because Kawasaki built a bike that could reach genuinely extreme speeds without the electronic systems or aerodynamic sophistication needed to make those speeds safe. Number 13, Suzuki GSX-R 1100. The 1986 Suzuki GSX-R 1100 combined 1,052 cubic inch inline-4, producing 125 horsepower, with weight approaching 550 pounds, creating a bike that was brutally fast but dangerously heavy and unstable when pushed beyond moderate speeds. Suzuki designed the GSX-R 1100 as the flagship sport bike, emphasizing raw power over the lightweight handling that would define later GSX-R models. The inline-4 featured air oil cooling with sophisticated engineering that allowed sustained high RPM operation, producing strong power throughout the rev range. The performance was genuinely impressive, with quarter-mile times in the low 11-second range and top speeds exceeding 150 miles per hour, proving the GSX-R could run with anything available in 1986. The danger came from weight that made the GSX-R feel ponderous and unwieldy during aggressive riding, when physics reminded riders that 550 pounds required force to change direction and distance to stop. The handling became unpredictable at high speeds when the weight and marginal aerodynamics combined to create instability that required constant corrections. The suspension was adequate for normal riding, but overwhelmed during aggressive cornering when the weight transferred violently and compressed suspension beyond its ability to control motion. The brakes were adequate for the era, with twin front discs providing reasonable stopping power, but the weight meant stopping distances were longer than lighter sport bikes, and fade during repeated hard stops was genuine concern. The GSX-R 1100 was dangerous because Suzuki prioritized power over weight control, creating a bike that was fast in straight lines, but genuinely treacherous when roads curved or emergency maneuvers required the agility that 550 pounds prevented. Number 12. Harley-Davidson AMF era models. The Harley-Davidson AMF era models from the 1970s and early 80s take 12th position not for excessive power, but for poor build quality and reliability that made them dangerous to ride when components failed unexpectedly. AMF purchased Harley-Davidson in 1969 and prioritized production volume over quality control, creating motorcycles that suffered electrical failures, oil leaks, and mechanical problems that could leave riders stranded or worse when failures occurred at speed. The V-twins produced modest power, 45 to 60 horsepower, but the engines themselves weren't the danger. The problem was everything surrounding the engine failing with regularity that destroyed Harley's reputation and created genuine safety hazards. Electrical systems failed, leaving riders without lights or ignition at critical moments. Primary chains broke, locking rear wheels and sending bikes into uncontrollable slides. Oil leaks created slippery conditions on rear tires that could cause sudden loss of traction. The build quality was genuinely poor, with fasteners that loosened from vibration, gaskets that leaked from day one, an assembly that seemed careless rather than the craftsmanship Harley's reputation had been built on before AMF ownership. The danger wasn't that AMF-era Harleys were too powerful or too fast, it was that they were unreliable in ways that could create hazardous situations when components failed without warning. Number 11. BMW K1. The 1988 BMW K1 represented BMW's radical attempt at building a superbike featuring 987 cubic inch inline-4, producing 100 horsepower, wrapped in radical bodywork that created more problems than it solved. The K1 featured full fairing with aggressive aerodynamics that BMW claimed would improve stability, but the reality was that the design created dangerous instability at high speeds when crosswinds caught the large surface area and pushed the bike unpredictably. The inline-4 was smooth and sophisticated with fuel injection, providing instant response and power delivery that felt refined compared to the raw violence that characterized Italian or Japanese sport bikes. The performance was adequate rather than extreme, with top speeds approaching 140 miles per hour, quick but not dangerous through sheer velocity alone. The danger came from radical bodywork, creating aerodynamic problems that made the K1 genuinely unstable in crosswinds, or when passing trucks where sudden air pressure changes could push the bike sideways violently. The large fairing panels caught wind like sails, creating forces that required constant steering corrections to maintain straight-line tracking. The weight approached 600 pounds, making the K1 feel heavy and unwieldy during normal riding and genuinely dangerous when aerodynamic instability combined with mass that resisted quick corrective inputs. Number 10. Triumph Rocket 3. The 2004 Triumph Rocket 3 featured 2,294 cubic inch inline-3, producing 140 horsepower and 163 foot-pounds of torque, massive numbers that made the Rocket 3 the largest displacement production motorcycle ever built. The torque output was genuinely staggering, exceeding what most cars produced and creating pulling power that could overwhelm the rear tire effortlessly when throttle was opened aggressively. The inline-3 delivered torque differently than V-twins or inline-4s. The power came on strong at low RPM and remained relentless throughout the rev range, creating acceleration that felt violent and unstoppable. The massive displacement meant the Rocket 3 didn't need high revolutions to produce power, delivering brutal acceleration from idle that could catch riders unprepared for how quickly 650 pounds could accelerate when 163 foot-pounds hit the rear wheel. The triple configuration created a distinctive exhaust note that was deeper and more muscular than inline-4s, but smoother than V-twins, producing a sound that announced the Rocket 3's presence with authority that couldn't be ignored by anyone within blocks of the motorcycle. The peak torque arrived at just 2,500 RPM, meaning even gentle throttle applications at low engine speeds could break traction and send the rear tire spinning if riders weren't anticipating how much rotational force the massive engine could produce from barely above idle. The red line was relatively low compared to sport bikes, limiting maximum RPM to around 6,000 revolutions per minute. But the Rocket 3 never needed to rev high because the displacement and torque meant acceleration remained brutal throughout the usable power band without requiring high RPM operation. The fuel consumption was substantial, with the massive engine drinking gasoline at rates approaching 35 miles per gallon during aggressive riding. meaning the fuel tank capacity of just over 5 gallons provided limited range that required frequent stops for refueling during extended rides, where the temptation to use the available torque made conservative throttle applications nearly impossible. The danger came from torque that could overwhelm the rear tire instantly in first and second gears, requiring careful throttle modulation to avoid wheel spin that would send the heavy Rocket 3 into a tank slapper as the front end lightened and the rear tire searched for traction. The weight made the Rocket 3 feel stable during normal riding, but genuinely dangerous when the massive torque was unleashed, because 650 pounds didn't change direction quickly when physics took over and the bike started moving sideways. The handling was adequate for a muscle cruiser, but nothing approaching sporting, with suspension tuned for comfort rather than aggressive riding and steering geometry that prioritized straight-line stability over quick direction changes. The Rocket 3 was dangerous because Triumph built a motorcycle with torque that exceeded what the chassis and tire technology could safely manage without sophisticated traction control that didn't exist on early models. Number 9. Kawasaki Z1. The 1972 Kawasaki Z1 takes 9th position as legendary for speed, but dangerous due to weak brakes and suspension that couldn't safely manage the performance the 903 cubic inch inline 4 delivered. The Z1 produced 82 horsepower, genuinely impressive output for 1972 that made it the most powerful production motorcycle available and created top speeds approaching 130 miles per hour. The inline 4 featured dual overhead cams and sophisticated engineering that allowed sustained high RPM operation, producing smooth, relentless power throughout the rev range. The engine delivered its power with refinement that seemed impossible from air-cooled 4 cylinders, creating acceleration that felt violent compared to British twins that had dominated performance motorcycles before the Z1 arrived and changed everything. The danger came from brakes that were barely adequate for the Z1's weight and completely overwhelmed when trying to slow from the speeds the engine enabled. The single front disc and rear drum provided marginal stopping power that required planning stops well in advance and accepting that emergency stops would take longer than riders expected based on the bike's performance capabilities. The front fork flexed under hard braking, creating instability and increasing stopping distances when the fork compressed beyond its ability to control motion. The suspension was basic, with minimal damping and limited adjustability. That meant the Z1 bounced and wallowed over bumps that would be absorbed by modern suspension without affecting stability. The handling was adequate for moderate speeds, but became unpredictable when speeds climbed and the suspension reached its limits, creating sensations that the bike wanted to swap ends or tank slapper into violent oscillations. Number 8. Ducati 996. The 1999 Ducati 996 featured 996 cubic inch V-twin, producing 112 horsepower with aggressive handling and high-speed instability that made it genuinely risky for riders who didn't understand Ducati's unique character. The L-twin delivered power with violence that seemed impossible from 112 horses, creating acceleration that felt brutal through low-end torque and power delivery that hit hard rather than building progressively. The desmodromic valve train used mechanical closing rather than springs, allowing higher RPM operation and more aggressive camshaft profiles that created the distinctive Ducati character, brutal at low RPM, violent at high RPM, and genuinely thrilling throughout the range. The performance was impressive, with top speeds approaching 170 miles per hour, and acceleration that could embarrass bikes with more horsepower through superior power-to-weight ratio. The danger came from handling that was aggressive and unforgiving, with steering geometry that made the 996 feel nervous and twitchy at low speeds, but stable at high speeds, where the instability emerged as high-speed wobbles that could develop without warning. The trellis frame was rigid, but the suspension setup required expertise to optimize, and improperly adjusted suspension could create handling that ranged from unpredictable to genuinely dangerous. The riding position was aggressive, with clip-on handlebars and rear-set foot pegs, creating posture that required strength to maintain during long rides or when fighting the bike through aggressive cornering. The 996 was dangerous because Ducati built a focused track bike for the street, creating a machine that rewarded skilled riders but punished mistakes violently and demanded respect that inexperienced buyers often didn't provide. Number 7. Honda CBR 900RR Fireblade. The 1992 Honda CBR 900RR Fireblade revolutionized sport bikes by combining 893 cubic inch inline 4 producing 122 horsepower, with a weight of just 457 pounds, creating power-to-weight ratio that made the Fireblade brutally fast and genuinely dangerous for inexperienced riders who didn't respect what that combination could do. Honda's philosophy was revolutionary. Rather than adding power to heavy bikes, reduce weight dramatically and create something that felt faster than the number suggested. The inline-4 featured sophisticated engineering with gear-driven cams and construction that allowed sustained high RPM operation, producing peak power above 11,000 revolutions per minute. The engine delivered smooth, relentless power that built progressively but violently once the revs climbed into the power band, where the Fireblade truly came alive and revealed its genuine performance capabilities. The danger came from weight reduction that made the Fireblade feel genuinely fast in ways that heavier bikes with more power couldn't match. The lightweight meant instant direction changes, violent acceleration, and handling that felt telepathic when everything was working correctly, but genuinely dangerous when riders exceeded their abilities, because the Fireblade responded so quickly that inputs had consequences before riders could process what was happening. The Fireblade was dangerous because Honda built a bike that felt manageable at moderate speeds, but became genuinely violent when pushed hard, with performance that exceeded what the rider aids available in 1992 could manage safely. The lack of traction control meant wheelies were constant during hard acceleration, requiring riders to manage the throttle carefully or accept that the front wheel would come up violently and stay up if they weren't prepared to close the throttle or shift their weight forward. Number 6. Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300R. The 1999 Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300R takes 6th position as the bike so fast it triggered a gentleman's agreement among Japanese manufacturers to limit top speeds at 186 miles per hour because the Hayabusa's performance threatened to bring government regulation that would destroy the sport bike market. The 1,299 cubic inch inline-4 produced 173 horsepower, creating top speeds approaching 200 miles per hour before electronic limiting became standard. The inline-4 featured sophisticated engineering with ram air induction, providing additional boost at high speeds, where the increased air pressure fed additional oxygen to the combustion chambers and allowed the engine to produce more power than static dyno testing suggested. The performance was genuinely extreme, with quarter-mile times in the mid-9-second range, and trap speeds exceeding 150 miles per hour, proving the Hayabusa could run faster than nearly anything on wheels. The danger came from speed that arrived so quickly that riders could find themselves traveling at genuinely dangerous velocities before fully comprehending how fast they were actually moving. The aerodynamics were sophisticated with wind tunnel development, creating bodywork that cut through air efficiently. But that efficiency meant speeds climbed relentlessly when throttle was held open and the Hayabusa accelerated toward velocities where mistakes or mechanical failures would be fatal. The Hayabusa was dangerous because Suzuki built a bike focused purely on maximum speed, without considering whether riders needed or could safely manage 200 miles per hour on public roads. The gentleman's agreement that followed the Hayabusa's introduction acknowledged that manufacturers had pushed too far, creating performance that exceeded what could be safely used outside racetracks, where runoff areas and safety equipment could mitigate consequences when things went wrong. Number 5. Kawasaki GPZ 900R. The 1984 Kawasaki GPZ 900R earned 5th position as the first Ninja, featuring 908 cubic inch inline-4, producing 115 horsepower that made it dangerously fast for its era, with limited braking technology to manage the speeds the engine enabled. The GPZ 900R represented quantum leap forward in sport bike performance, creating top speeds approaching 150 miles per hour, when most bikes struggled to reach 120. The inline-4 featured liquid cooling and sophisticated engineering, allowing sustained high RPM operation, producing smooth power throughout the rev range. The performance was genuinely extreme for 1984, with acceleration that felt violent compared to everything else available, creating quarter-mile times that placed the GPZ among the fastest production vehicles, regardless of wheels or configuration. The danger came from braking technology that hadn't kept pace with engine development, creating situations where the GPZ could accelerate to genuinely dangerous speeds, but couldn't consistently stop from those velocities with confidence riders needed for safe, aggressive riding. The twin front discs were adequate for the era, but marginal when trying to slow from 150 miles per hour repeatedly. with fade becoming genuine concern during aggressive riding when brake temperatures climbed beyond what the system could safely manage. The GPZ 900R was dangerous because Kawasaki prioritized straight-line speed over balanced performance, creating a bike that was genuinely fast but lacked the brakes, suspension, and handling sophistication needed to make that speed safe when roads curved or emergency situations required capabilities that speed alone couldn't provide. Number 4. Yamaha TZ750. The Yamaha TZ750, from 1974 through 79, takes fourth position as the race bike so powerful it was eventually banned because even professional riders found it genuinely dangerous to ride at the limit where championships were won. The 750 cubic inch two-stroke inline four produced approximately 140 horsepower, genuinely extreme output for the displacement and era when most road bikes produced half that power from larger engines. The two-stroke design delivered power with violence that four strokes couldn't match, with peak output arriving suddenly rather than progressively, and creating acceleration that felt explosive rather than smooth. The TZ750 featured sophisticated engineering with reed valves, expansion chamber exhausts, and tuning that optimized power delivery for racing, where maximum output mattered more than drivability or reliability concerns that street bikes required. The danger was power that arrived so suddenly and violently that even professional racers struggled to manage it safely, with the transition from minimal power to maximum output happening so quickly that throttle control required skills that few riders possessed. The two-stroke power band was narrow with minimal power below the power band, explosive power when revs climbed into the sweet spot, and power falling off dramatically beyond peak RPM. The TZ750 was eventually banned from certain racing classes because the performance exceeded what tracks, tires, and brakes available in the 70s could safely manage, creating situations where riders were crashing not through lack of skill, but because the bikes were simply too powerful for the supporting technology to safely contain. Number 3. Honda CX 500 Turbo. The 1982 Honda CX 500 Turbo takes third position for turbo lag that made power delivery genuinely unpredictable and dangerous when boost arrived suddenly rather than progressively. Honda fitted a turbocharger to the 497 cubic inch V-twin, increasing output to 82 horsepower, but creating power delivery that felt like two completely different engines, depending on whether boost was active. The turbocharger was sized for response rather than maximum boost, but even the relatively small unit created substantial lag, where throttle applications produced minimal power until boost built and suddenly unleashed the full 82 horsepower that felt violent compared to the previous docile behavior. The transition from off boost to full boost was dramatic enough that riders could feel the engine character change completely, creating unpredictability that was genuinely dangerous during cornering when sudden boost arrival could overwhelm traction and send the bike into slides. The danger was power delivery that changed based on conditions riders couldn't always predict, with boost arrival depending on throttle position, RPM, and load factors. That meant the same throttle input could produce wildly different results, depending on whether boost was active. The Honda was sophisticated for 1982 with boost control and intercooling, but the fundamental problem of lag couldn't be solved with 80s technology, creating situations where riders struggled to predict how much power throttle applications would actually produce. Number 2. Suzuki TL1000S. The 1997 Suzuki TL1000S takes second position as infamous for unstable rear suspension that created dangerous wobbling, leading to recalls and lawsuits when the rotary rear damper proved inadequate for managing the 996 cubic inch V-twin, producing 125 horsepower. Suzuki designed the TL1000S as a lightweight sport bike, emphasizing handling over straight-line speed. But the innovative rear suspension became the bike's downfall when real-world use revealed serious flaws. The V-twin delivered strong power with character that felt more violent than inline fours, producing similar output, creating acceleration that was brutal rather than smooth, and power delivery that hit hard throughout the rev range. The performance was impressive with quarter-mile times in the low 11-second range, proving that TL could run with anything available in 1997. The danger came from rotary rear damper that used rotating disc rather than conventional piston damper, creating inconsistent damping that allowed the rear to oscillate during hard acceleration or mid-corner bumps. The oscillations could build into violent tank slappers that terrified riders and created genuine safety hazards when the bike became uncontrollable despite rider inputs attempting to stabilize the chassis. Suzuki recalled TL1000S models and offered conventional rear shocks to replace the problematic rotary dampers, but the damage to the bike's reputation was permanent. The TL1000S became infamous as the bike with dangerous suspension that even Suzuki's engineers couldn't make work safely, creating situations where the bike could become genuinely uncontrollable through no fault of the rider. Number 1. Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. The 1972 Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 takes the top position as the most dangerous motorcycle ever made, earning the nickname Widowmaker. Through brutal acceleration and handling so poor, it killed riders with regularity that justified the terrifying reputation. The 750 cubic inch two-stroke triple produced approximately 74 horsepower, numbers that seem modest until you understand that two-stroke power delivery was violent, the frame was inadequate, and the brakes were genuinely terrible. The two-stroke triple delivered power with violence that seemed impossible from 74 horses, with all the power arriving suddenly rather than progressively when revs climbed into the power band, where the 3 expansion chambers created resonance that supercharged the cylinders and unleashed fury. The power came on so violently that the front wheel would lift despite the rider's weight, creating wheelies that weren't controlled acceleration, but genuine loss of control as physics took over. The frame flexed under the two-stroke's violent power delivery, creating handling that felt loose and imprecise at moderate speeds, but became genuinely dangerous when speeds climbed and the frame twisted under acceleration or braking forces. The front fork was basic, with minimal damping and stanchions that flexed under hard braking, creating the sensation that the bike wanted to swap ends rather than maintain straight-line stability. The brakes were the Mach 4's most dangerous feature, a single front disc that was completely inadequate for the bike's weight and the speeds the engine enabled. Stopping from high speeds required planning and distance that seemed impossible, with brake fade becoming genuine concern after repeated hard stops when friction material overheated and stopping power declined dramatically, just when riders needed maximum braking performance. The Mach 4 was dangerous because Kawasaki prioritized straight-line acceleration over every other consideration, creating bike that could reach genuinely high speeds quickly, but couldn't steer accurately, couldn't stop consistently, and couldn't maintain stability when the violent power delivery overwhelmed the inadequate chassis. The nickname Widowmaker was earned through body count that justified the terrifying reputation, with riders discovering too late that the Mach 4 demanded skills that few possessed and punished mistakes, with consequences that ranged from embarrassing crashes to fatal accidents. The two-stroke triple remained in production despite its dangers because buyers wanted the performance and accepted the risks. But the Mach 4's reputation ensured that it would be remembered as the most dangerous production motorcycle ever built, the bike that killed riders with such regularity that even Kawasaki's engineers eventually acknowledged that performance without adequate control systems was genuinely fatal. These 15 dangerous motorcycles prove that power without adequate brakes, handling without stability, and speed without electronic assistance created genuinely dangerous machines that killed riders and terrified manufacturers. From two-stroke triples, earning the nickname Widowmaker, to modern superbikes so fast they triggered international agreements limiting speed, these were the motorcycles that demanded respect and punished mistakes violently. Which of these dangerous legends would you dare to ride? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you love stories about motorcycles that push too far, hit that subscribe button for more.